Very good afternoon, everyone. I just quickly wanted to test the mic of all the speakers. So I would request Prishti sir, can you please unmute yourself and say hello? Okay. So you're not audible. Can you say slightly louder?
Hello, is it
Yeah.
okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Um, we also have Major General Manoj sir with us. Sir, can you just unmute yourself and say hello?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
yes. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jayashree ma'am, can you also please unmute yourself?
Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, ma'am. Vikrant, kindly unmute you and say hello once. Vikrant, you're not audible. Okay, we'll begin like shortly. Thank you so much, everyone. Very good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here on time. It's indeed a great pleasure for Spear India COVID-19 Academy, and on behalf of Spear India COVID-19 Academy, I would like to invite everyone for this second phase of Spear India COVID-19 Academy in the inaugural session of Spear India COVID-19 Academy Phase 2. And this session today, Spear India COVID-19 Academy is a joint capacity building initiative of training frontline workers and volunteers. And it's in collaboration with WHO, NIDM, UNICEF India, and World Food Program that we bring this Phase 2 Academy and the inaugural session of this Phase 2 Academy to everyone. So today, the session is about Environment Impact Assessment Notification 2020, Consultation and Next Steps. So as everyone is aware that Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has published the draft about EIA, that's Environment Impact Assessment Notification 2020. It is with the intention of replacing the existing EIA notification 2006 under the Environment Protection Act 1986. The government wants to incorporate modifications made to the regulation through amendments. The government has invited feedback on the notification and has already received a massive response to it. So the analysis of the past disaster and how it establishes a close correlation to the disasters and environment in the coming time is what we are going to discuss in this inaugural session today. How the risk manifolds with impact of both climate change and disasters on social sector linkages with existing food production, supplies, environmental health risks. So we as a Spear India COVID-19 Academy will be bringing a series of webinars starting today to explore the linkages sector-wise and make appropriate recommendation to the respective ministries and all the stakeholders involved. So for today's session, we have a list of very eminent panelists with us, and I would like to introduce starting with our keynote speaker, who is Major General Mr. Manoj Kumar Bindal, who is Executive Director of National Institute of Disaster Management. He was commissioned into the Corps of Army Air Defense in December 1985. Also an alumnus of National Defense Academy, Manoj sir is a graduate of Defense Service Staff College and has attended the prestigious High Command course at the Army War College, besides excelling in other career courses in the Army. Uh, I welcome you, sir, to the webinar today. We have Professor Santosh Kumar, who is a professor uh, of NIDM, and he is a major in disaster risk reduction, policy planning, and capacity development. An expert with 25 years of experience in different positions in development planning and DRR sector. Also a PhD in economics. He studied gender and development in IDS, UK, and received professional training in disaster risk management from Israel, backed with international work exposure at the World Bank and intergovernmental body of SARC. So I welcome you, sir, to today's discussion. We also have today with us Mr. N.M. Trishti, who is Chief Mentor cum Director of CD MAS. With over 35 years of experience in country as well as overseas positions of importance, he has held important positions in government, non-governmental, social development, disaster management, and corporate organizations. With engineering and management as his educational background and several multidisciplinary training in India and abroad, he is also part of select global team of eminent persons in the area of disaster management involved in making SPEAR standards for disaster management. Also founder chairperson of SPEAR India. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Another panelist for today's session is Dr. Jayashree Venkatesan. She is from Care Earth Trust Director. Uh, she works on issues of conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity and ecological restoration, with a special interest in wetlands. That's where her expertise lies. She has to her credit 30 scientific publications and one book. She currently serves as Care Earth's managing trustee as well. Very warm welcome to you, ma'am. Our one more panelist for today's discussion is Mr. Sanjay Vashisht, who is Director Kansa South Asia. Uh, Sir has been working towards mobilizing civil society action on climate policies in South Asian countries and South Asian region. Especially, he has authored and co-authored and facilitated drafting of many technical papers, framing climate solutions and finding convergence on policy practice linkages. He has also been a team member of technical team constituted by multilateral agencies to assess impacts of climate variables of vulnerable communities and to frame policy recommendation to address them. A very warm welcome to you as well, sir. And the moderator for today's panel discussion is Mr. Vikrant Mahajan, who is CEO Spear India. Vikrant has 24 years of professional experience working at interagency policy level and frontline humanitarian action with government, UN corporations, CSOs, and armed forces in various diverse contexts. He has led interagency coordination for more than 100 disasters and represents on governance and policy level committees of several international organizations. Currently also holding position of CEO Spear India. So with this, I welcome everyone in today's panel discussion. And Vikrant, I would hand over to you to take forward the session now. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Navila, for this kind introduction and setting the context. I think today we've got a very important agenda on a discussion, and as Navila said, I think we will be dealing it with through a series of consultation, webinars, and discussions. Uh, as we all aware, that government of India, through its Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change, have introduced the a new notification on the environment impact assessment. So there are definitely some strategic and economic considerations uh, uh, behind these, and also I think as it has come up as more of a draft, the government is also open to looking at the consultation, inviting input from the civil society and everybody, and it has got a massive response. I think there's some figures in the media saying almost 17 lakh inputs have already been received. While I think as a coalition, many of us have also already made submissions. Herein through this webinar, and this is ahead, we also want to look at and delve into see the relationship between the environment, disasters, and the development, primarily the social sector, social service sectors, the as we call them as humanitarian sectors. So today we, as Navila has introduced, today we got a very interesting and a very experienced professional group of professional experts who are our eminent panelists today, and we will take the discussions through then one by one to them and open up our discussion with the participants for an open interaction also. To begin with it, may I request Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, the Executive Director of NIDM, to kindly give his keynote address and apprises also. I think there is definitely from such experience, there is a lot of security considerations also behind the notification. So I'll request sir to, if you can guide us through all these things. Over to you, Major General Bindal.
Thank you, Vikrant. It's a very, very apt topic on which COVID Sphere Academy has chosen to start its phase two. And there can be no other topic as burning as environmental impact assessment. Because everywhere we are talking about greenhouse gases, we are talking about global warming, we are talking about damaging the environment, and hence impact assessment of environment becomes very necessary. Here, the question that is being discussed today is that this revised draft, how good it is, or what are the loopholes, and how it can be made better. Because we are aware that we are signatory to the Stockholm Declaration of 72 on environment. We enacted the laws to control water in 74 and then control air pollution in 1981. But it was only after the Bhopal gas leak disaster in 84 that we legislated the Umbrella Act for Environmental Protection in 1986. And thereafter, we first issued the norms in 1994, which set in place a legal framework for regulating activities that access, utilize, and affect or pollute natural resources. And every development process has been required to go through this EIA process for obtaining prior environmental clearance. Now, this was again modified in 2006, and now it has been redrafted to make it more transparent and expedient. So here the contention that is coming up is more expedient. This expediency, is it going to affect the environment more, or is it going to damage the environment more? Because there are now provisions in that within 100 kilometers of the border, strategic issues will be taken care of. Roads, there are a large number of projects which are stuck up all over the country uh, for the military strategic reasons. So as a military man, I'm happy with that provision where the government will take the decision on strategic nature of the project. But for as an environment man, if I put on the other shoe, then there is a cause of concern is what are the parameters under which this strategic decision is to be taken by the government, and where does it stop? So it has right now been restricted to inland waterways and highways of certain length. So there is a need for caution that whenever the strategic nature of a project is to be decided and environmental clearance to be given by the government, it has to be taken, seen with a fine prism. Secondly, if you go through all the annexures of this environmental assessment, it has got large number of columns to fill up. And some of those columns actually is not known to anyone. How do they fill it up? Because there is no quantification where we are talking about what will be the impact on the ecosystem. Uh, how will a person write that? He'll only write there'll be no impact. So I think there should be a quantification mechanism also set up parallelly, wherein the impact is quantified, because right now it is very objective. It is subjective, I'll say, wherein a person just write light, low, high, medium, or something like that, whatever will ensure getting the approval. But there is no scientific data behind it. So these forms, once filled, should have the basis of some scientific data for which a community, a proper structural framework needs to be set up to put it out in the natural, into the environment of all such readings, so that people can take their own decisions and fill it out. It should not be left between the two people who's filling it and the one who's uh, approving it, or who's ticking it as yes. It should not just become one more box to be ticked. Because all the questions, if you read in the annexure 2, 3, 4, and all those up to whatever number, I think 11, 14 or 15 are there, uh, all of them have been very, very carefully and very stringently, someone has applied it mind, and it has been applied by someone who is a scientist or like a researcher, that making of those columns. But how to fill it has not been given. On what parameters it's to be decided, maybe that should also be listed out against each form. The parameters to be left out, like we have when we go for passport. For each form, everything is listed out, what is to be done, what is to be checked. So something like that. I'm skeptical of that part, that forms will be filled out and it will be accepted, and we might land up doing more damage to the environment than what is intended. Uh, the other issue is uh, uh, there are large number of projects which have been given exclusion. Now, that is where people can, just by keeping it under the threshold of that exclusion at the upper limit, uh, people can get away with a lot of damage. And the violation, like late application, it is just 2,000 to 10,000 per day for thousands of crores project. This is peanuts for them, because like an example was given in one of the newspapers, that a sand miner who takes out several truckloads every day, for him paying 2,000 to 10,000 per day, he can keep doing it for a long period of time. So the penal provisions given in this are not, I'll say, uh, penal enough, prohibitive enough to ensure that people follow it very seriously. So governance issues I'm talking about, quantification issues of the impact I'm talking about, and third thing is I'm talking about the decision to make it a strategic decision I'm talking about. These three are the main concerns that I have today to start with. And of course, during the course of the uh, webinar, a lot of issues will come up, because we have so many experts who are going to talk on this. All the names were taken by the person who introduced all of us. So I'm keen to listen to all of them. And over to you, Vikram.
Thank you very much, sir. I think you very eloquently put across, the three top concerns, the three top issues linked with that. And I think that more as we move forward with the next discussions, I think more clarity will get onto it. I think for the benefit of all of us and our participants here, maybe I think for the next speaker, Dr. Jayashri, she being a scientist and probably coming from the ecological science background. So, Dr. Jayashri, if you can really help us, understand the science and the rationale behind this, the environment impact assessment, and also, to some of the questions like certain questions raised by General Bindal about quantifying it and then qualifying it through this assessment, how it is being done and how it can be done better. If you can help us take through this. Over to you, Dr. Jayashree.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I'm fully in alignment with what Major General said, that quantification is indeed a problem. But even before I speak about that, I would like to actually step a bit back and talk about the context in which EIA is being discussed, at least in now current times. It's a matter of surprise, or I could even say it's a matter of shock, that 28 years after the Rio Convention was signed, we are still talking about environment, conservation, and development as two opposing pillars. That fact that we've not been able to reconcile conservation as an input to development, progress, growth of a country, or for that matter, for any entity, is a matter of serious concern. So conservation is a tool for development, is a message that we fail to spread across the citizenry of the country. That I think is the biggest concern. This concern is contributed largely due to the fact that we really do not have on ground expertise to even assess biodiversity. I limit myself to biological diversity because that's what I'm trained in. As Major General pointed out, quantification is the next step. But even before we go there, the basic assessment capability and skill is also sadly absent. So when it is absent, what often happens is a very ad hoc kind of an assessment using subjective terms like, high, very critical, and using terms as one would wish them to be used. So for example, every plant becomes a rare plant, every animal becomes a threatened animal. This kind of a romanticized, hyped up kind of a projection is made, primarily because there's no broad based kind of an expertise available. So even before we actually get into discussing the merits and demerits of the EIA in its current form, we need to recognize and involve and put all our efforts into building this capability. It's a sad reflection of the fact that basic sciences has taken a beating in this country, at least for the last 20 years. In contrast, when you actually look at the environment parameters, there's a lot of expertise available because India contributes a lot to engineering sciences, and you have people who can effectively, at least in comparison to biological parameters, you have people who can actually contribute very well to the environmental sciences part, whether it be air pollution, water pollution, and the methods that are used there are very tangible. So you have numerical data coming in even as you test. But in biological diversity, in biosystems, in ecosystem, a point was made about ecosystem valuation. These are in this no man's area, in the very gray area of biology, economics, econometrics. That's where the methods are still very nascent. Thereby, the data that comes in is also extremely qualitative. You need to really apply your mind to do that. I would say that even before we actually discuss the EIA and the merits of it, we need to recognize that expertise is very scant, very meager. The second issue that comes about it is the fact that a lot of fraudulent data gets generated by people who are accredited. In fact, the system of accreditation needs to be reviewed. Accredited agencies that are empowered or that are listed as capable of doing EIA, the kind of people who become part of it, the kind of documents that they generate, lends itself to dismissal very, very easily. For instance, some time ago, I had the chance of reviewing an EIA for a very important offshore project. The birds that were listed were all birds that are normally found in European countries. They did not list even a single bird that's found in the coasts of India or the seas of India. With that, they were pushing for it, and they said this has to go because there is a list of birds. Now, if somebody had to review whether this bird list is valid or not, you really don't have expertise. Likewise, for hydro projects, many of the projects call for expertise in entomology, aquatic entomology. It's just a handful of people who do that. So, unless the point I'm trying to make is to overcome fraud, to overcome subjectivity, to overcome misrepresentation, a lot of focus needs to be put into building capacities of people in doing EIA. And unless we do that, this problem is going to continue. We need not even at this point of time talk about very refined means of doing science. Even the rudimentary science is absent, is what I would say. I hope I answered your question. If not, I could take a supplementary question and do the needful.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jayashree. I think, yeah, we will continue to discuss this. I think you really brought out some pertinent issues about, it's not about the environment impact assessment here. It's also about, how we're doing it and the capacity building around this. And I think it's happening enough forum where I think with the NIDM and Sphere India, maybe uh, two of the institutions which works on the capacity building. Perhaps we there's a lot to follow up and supplement onto this notification, that it's that it's not necessarily that the changes in the law, it also more in terms of bringing the implementation capacities and a meaningful, more meaningful reports that we're going to work on. Thanks for bringing that up. I think before moving forward, um, I would quickly try to take through a summary, I think, which my colleague Sanjay has also shared with me. He's not able to join due to internet issues, traveling somewhere in Diga in West Bengal. So taking the points, I think what is some of the key changes which we are seeing in this new notification? Uh, Firstly, the space for the public participation, which earlier used to be there, seems to be reducing, as it was a 30 days of window was there, which is now getting reduced to 20 days. And the after the clearance of the project, the compliance is appears to be weakening in the new notification, whereas the earlier there used to be requirement of a two reports in a year. Now it's getting reduced to one report in a year. uh, and also the project seeking expansion or modernization with capacity increased up to 50% are exempted from public hearing. So many of the coal mining projects, I think there are economic reasons for that. Maybe we'll hear from Professor Santosh also. Now they are exempted for up to 40% increase in the capacity. Then there is the non-participatory monitoring requirements. For the project affected communities are not now authorized to monitor the projects. Ministry of Environment and Forest to will impanel government institution to carry out compliance and monitoring of projects. So again, the external third-party compliances. How do we see that? And the draft EIA provides a process to even legalize the post facto clearances. So some of these are the key changes which we are seeing in this notification. Um, and as we hear, there are security consideration, the economic considerations behind it. But then, as Dr. Jeshwari also said, that the economic consideration and development and environment, can we see them into separate, isolate pillars? So I think we will. This is the pitch where I will like to take the discussion forward, and who best than the Professor Santosh to take us through that. So, Professor Santosh, so you being an economist, along though we know you are a DLR professional, but I think is with your background more in economics, uh, what do you see some of the economic rationales again with some of the key projects that's behind this guiding us the revision of this revision and the notification which we are seeing it. Uh, Maybe I think my second part of question, where I'll bring it up subsequently more from a disaster point of view. If we see and try to understand the economic rationales, of some of the undergoing projects or the new projects which we foresee, that's guiding us to look at this step towards the new notification, which is largely being perceived as a dilution in the environmental acts and environmental norm. Over to you, Professor Santosh. So can you hear? So you are mute.
Now,
Yes, you can.
am I
Yeah, you're audible
am
now,
I
sir.
Yes, sir.
So you're probably speaking from a distance. We still can't hear you.
I am having this can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's better now.
What I am saying, I'm giving you this am I audible?
Yes, 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 sir.
So I would
So first,
still request you to come slightly closer to the mic if you're using audio.
mic I'm putting on the mouth itself. It is touching my lips.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, is it okay now? I don't know.
It's
Am I
fine. It's
audible?
just a little volume is little less. Otherwise, it's fine.
Okay, let me work on the volume also. Okay. So what I was telling to start with, this is my personal viewpoint. Uh, Working with the World Bank way back, and the most jittery point was that when we are going for the sanction of the project, so it was after the super cyclone, Orissa, and we were having not the same point of time we were working in Gujarat and Andhra. We had this large, bigger project of rural roads and also the urban road construction, rural and the urban, plus bigger infrastructure like mini dams and kind of irrigation facilities. And during that time, as a professional, we were worried about this why this EIA is there. First point of concern as a project manager. Second concern was the SIA, that social impact assessment. And today, when we are working in disaster, we are thinking about DIA also, disaster impact assessment. But I will not touch the DIA for the time being. But what is the dilemma which we are into, that whether we should go for the environmental impact assessment in a more kind of a stringent way, or we have to have a certain midway or mid path where we can manage with both without the rigorous and but also to be the beneficial that in terms of the people. So, as an economic point of view, like I'm giving you a classic example of today's COVID-19, where we had this complete lockdown as a beneficiaries to the people that nobody would get affected. But later on, we looked at the economy angle, and a life and livelihood becomes much more important. And then we have opened, even though that after the city opening, the large number of deaths are being reported. But the survival became as a much more important in this particular case. So here, because when we are doing impact assessment, environmental impact assessment as economic point of view, uh, actually the concern of the project manager and the development manager, the concern is that how long this project will go if EIA is a prolonged kind of a process. So the detailing out and doing everything and each and everything, whether so we have to see now at this point of Vikram, which you have said, that how those things which have been removed from this EIA, how actually it has impacted and helped in actually maintaining the thing which we wanted, the objective to be achieved. So that study is required, that those have been removed, what this kind of obstacle or that was a facilitating the process. If that was an obstacle and not working much more at the 4 5 points you have mentioned, that it was that public the disclosure of the project was also for 30 months, 30 days, which has been reduced to 20 days, and you said that public participation is not there, and it would be done by the third party review. Like in the project, the housing project which we had in Gujarat, and there is a large number of impact assessment was to be done because the new area was taken up. Even the debris disposal was an environmental impact assessment where the same ceramics and other things were to be disposed of. So where it will go, it will impact environment. But people had to come in the house and they had to obtain this house. So that was the challenges between that emergency and also the requirement. In fact, what happens that entire ecological and other environmental things is a long process. It has a benefit in the long run, and where it gets ignored is a shorter time. So what happens that we tend to dilute those things which is not impacting immediately. So that becomes as a kind of problem. If that those processes if we maintain and if the speed of the process is higher, then probably will not have any problem. But this is coming as a, the sanction of the project itself is taking time. So entire development investment gets jeopardized. So here we need to look at that those restrictions which were there, if those have been removed and how they impacted. So if whether it has a logical deduction or it has a kind of a illogical deduction. The second point which I would like to make is that the entire projects which we did, that was a governmental third party review which was made. And that third party was as an excellent outcome. It was not, although that approach is different these days in the development discourse, also we are talking about social audit and other things also. So social audit has a place, and I will not say that social audit will completely be removed. So that should find its place in the development of that area. And Singur is a classic example when it happened there, and you talked about that. So for development, we need to look at these things that how these things are not delaying the project execution. As Mr. General Bindal also mentioned about security issues and other quantification. Madam was also telling whether EIA capacity we have. We have a longer process to do, and we do not have the capacity. It will further prolong this, and the cost of the project would increase. So economy of scale, it will not work much. So that is why government require larger investment today, and immediately the result also, because currently the situation is different, and because of COVID, we have lost already the GDP negative trend. So probably we may have to improve those. So those kind of projects can be taken up on a priority basis, which doesn't have much more of a kind of environmental implications. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And maybe now going away from the economic aspect of it, more coming up the the link between the environment and the disasters. Uh, and as we say that disasters, the if we analyze the some of the major disasters over last few years, the kind of impact and the economic loss we have because of the disasters. So how do we rationalize that by expediting certain projects through economic lens, and we leading to more disasters, causing taking us back by years again. So how do we solve this conundrum and the linkage between the environment, economy, and disasters, sir?
This is a real challenging issue, Vikrant, which you have posed to us. And now we are also advocating that how the disaster environment and this development can go together. Even if the SDG agenda, if you look at the CCA agenda, you look at, and the Sendai framework, you look at, we are talking comprehensively. And in the long run process, which we say that ultimately what we got after this execution, and we say that the larger projects which were implemented earlier is causing much more damage even after before the completion of the project benefits. So when the CB analysis, which we do, the cost benefit analysis, and if you do the projects which we have taken in the past, and with the perspective of disaster, then we see that probably we are doing a larger mistake. Even if that many of the projects which are being taken, whether the irrigation project or the dam, like the dam we created for maintaining the irrigation and water management. But today the dam is creating as a havoc, and 100 years old, 90 years old, 70 years old. But these would be actually, we are not thinking of decommissioning of these projects, these larger dams. So such kind of a things when we create today, and after 20 years, that what we say decommissioning or the coming out from those projects would be really dangerous. And recently, which MHA has completed one study that is on the disaster indexing. And if you look at the disaster indexing, entire country has been given certain weightage average. And if you look at that, whether the disaster indexing can also be go into the form of in the management of the entire discourse of environmental impact assessment. As a disaster management concern, definitely I would like to get this integrated, because the environment and disaster management is you can't separate it out; it go together. So, in the context of EIA has not looked at disaster per se. So, our disaster angle should have been also layered with the impact. So, these are the things which we are thinking. The disaster angle, it is much more important, because disaster management advocacy has not been done much as it has been done in the case of climate change and the environment and development. So maybe our advocacy part is weak, so that is not getting to bring out. And ultimately, what we are seeing, and that is creating more disasters and $1 billion of this cost which is occurring. So on the basis of this, that we can say that this cost benefit analysis should be included in our industry, especially in the context of disaster.
Yes, sir. I think yeah, that's really a balancing act. We need to look at the economic development, the way GDP driven or the production driven economic development, and the way we see the development with environment and the cost benefit analysis. That's there. I think the
Actually, Vikrant, we are very confused society now. No? We do not know how to prioritize whether we need immediate GDP, high GDP for taking the solution and taking it to the people, removing poverty. And the second is also we want that conservation, madam was telling conservation is part and parcel of it. And the third, we are also saying that there should not be any disasters. So in this race, we are forgetting the basics of the humanitarian uh, kind of approach when we talk about we are doing for what? We are doing for the lives and people, the lives of the people. And ultimately, if that is not protected, probably all the development will go to
Yes, sir.
कहते हैं बेमानी में. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I think that's the you really move to the real bring put people at the center of it, and again the people have their own vulnerabilities to see. So yes, and it's not. It's really I think it's not the easy way forward. It's the complexities of balancing the priorities of steering the economic growth, the GDP driven model, and then also simultaneously taking a balance of the environmental concerns, environmental norms, and all of them as we start seeing is this link is interlinkages with disasters and the people. I think you brought other people. I think, and with this, I think I'll move to our next panelist, Mr. Prusti. Prusti, you come from a, I think all these questions, which these interlinkages we're talking about, and there then the social service sectors, the humanitarian issues around that. So, how do you see that within the new notification and the new norms we want to? The debate is already on for that. If we are moving forward with that, what measures can we take it up to see that the humanitarian concerns arising out of it still can be addressed, and what can be done differently to see that what has not been working in the environment impact assessment still we can work on that, and we can achieve that little creatively. So, over to you, Mr. Prusti.
Okay, thank you, Vikrant. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, very clear.
Okay. Uh, Thank you. In fact, very appropriately, General Bindal initiated the discussion, pointing out some of the shortcomings, and coming it from senior officials of the government is laudable. And I thank him for those observations.
Okay.
And Madam Jayashree also brought the final aspects. So that those are very appropriate in the today's discussion context. And Santosh also brought this economics aspect. Uh, and you have been asking me about the disaster interface, environment disaster interface. Uh, if some of you or most of you would have seen my comments immediately after the notifications came out and all that, I gave a very 9-point observations on this. In fact, let me tell you a kind of historical perspective that since last 3 decades I've been working in the area of disaster management and social development. And when I used to look at how we are handling this environment impact in the disaster context, and when I go to the discussions and consultations on disaster management, when I ask about disaster risk assessment, disaster risk audit, disaster risk impact management, people tell me that no, these things are very well covered in environment impact management, in that environment impact assessment. When I go to environment impact discussions and consultations, and this is that we are concerned with only environment, and the disaster is the subject, there is a disaster management act and all that. Actually, the interface is between the two is very clearly missing out in the any kind of dispensation. There is no focus, no objective assessment of disaster risk assessment. So therefore my point was that if it has to be part of EIA, let it be part of EIA in a very prominent and very appropriate manner. If it cannot become part of EIA, then let it come as a separate provisions as the social impact assessment has been made a separate provisions, disaster impact assessment should be made a provision. But this should come out very clear. This is first point. So then the second point I like to make here is that we are doing the modifications in the disaster impact assessment has been made with a sole objective of ease of doing business. And ease of doing business is very appropriate. Naturally, in fact, we economic gain, we must see, we have to become economic power. So we should create a facilitated environment for business. And we are one of our policy is also ease of doing business. But while doing ease of doing business, what about ease of managing environment impact? What about ease of managing disaster losses? What about what is our policy on mainstreaming? Now it is more than nearly 2 decades. The government has announced the policy of mainstreaming that development disasters that we mainstream because both have got a clear interface and very close linkage. But if that is only stated in a document or stated as a policy, but what are our actions towards mainstreaming? If we do not look at this impact in the right perspective, then we are faulting on the objective, policy objective of mainstreaming. This is my second point. Third point, that Professor Santosh and Vikrant and you said that your GDP driven growth we need and all that. But let me say that, okay, we do soft paddling on environment impact management, and we say that this will expedite and it will give GDP gain. But when there is a disaster, what is GDP loss is occurring? And today we have seen that disaster is resulting in less and less human loss, but more and more asset loss. Our economic loss is becoming humongous. And so if you calculate over a time horizon, what is GDP gain and GDP loss, you will find that your net GDP is not, you are not really benefiting out of compromising on any of these environment aspects. So therefore, net GDP should be focused in an intergenerational perspective. And in fact, your development is the foundation of any development activities or foundation of any development policy is to look at intergeneration perspective, and environment is one such thing. So therefore, how this thing is to be looked at is my dilemma. Then the last point that when we are looking at environmental impact, can we not provide some kind of a checklist? How does it look at the natural drainage system? Does it impact? So let there be the analysis and impact assessment may very categorically talked about. How does it deal with any waterfront management, maybe ocean, maybe river? How does it and then how is it affecting the your marine ecosystem? How does it affect the flora and fauna of the area? How does it impact the forest and green cover? How does it impact the wetlands? How does it affect the animal, the livestock, the wild animals, etc. So if this kind of specificity are provided in this environment impact assessment, they probably will be making it much better, and the ease of doing business along with ease of managing environment and ease of managing disaster losses will be able to be addressed. The final statement is that we are having this the method of administering this environment. In fact, it has become a joke today. Many people will agree in private that the so-called environment impact assessment consultants, they are producing environmental impact reports like a photocopier producing the copies kind of thing. And the way they are accredited, the way they conduct the assessment, and the way they produce reports, and the way they also, and they are not only in the environmental impact assessor, they have come out more prominently as the environment clearance provider. They have become the broker in managing these clearances and all that. One day I was one the such a consultancy organization. They approached me, said, "Can you help us in developing some projects and all that?" Then when I went to the office and talked, then he was very proudly was making mention that I produced 350 environmental impact assessment in the last 6 months. So I was stunned that if an organization can produce 350 environmental impact assessment in a period of 6 months, and then say that I have so many people, I have a laboratory, I have this, that kind of thing. And out of my 350 assessments, you'll be surprised that to 300 clients have got successfully obtained the environmental clearance. So this is the kind of ecosystem that we are living in. So So therefore, this is my submission. And since it's a consultation, this is a forum for sharing openly what is the problem and how do we improve our system. I thought it is most appropriate that I flag it here in this platform. Thank you, Vikrant.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I think for bringing that aspect also. I think it's the entire the ecosystem which we have of the it's not just the issues which we are seeing, the security considerations or the economic consideration driving it out to the new notification, but also what exists, how good it has been, and how good it has been working about this. So I think with these things, I'll go back again to Dr. Jayashri. I think so. Dr. Jayashri, do you what's your take onto it? How good has been our existing the environment impact assessments, and then also do you see that moving forward with the with the new notifications, and are we still able to see that in the other project areas or in our own development SDGs and others, we are still able to work it in a way to achieve the emission norms and other environmental norms? Is possible? What do you suggest for that? Over to you.
Okay, I see two components, two parts in your question. The first pertaining to what our legacy has been as far as environmental impact assessment is concerned. And second, how can we ensure better compliance to the international commitments and national commitments that we have given? To answer your first question, I would have loved to say that we are really top quality when it comes to environmental impact assessment, both the compliance part as well as the follow-up part. But unfortunately, the bitter truth is we really have left a lot to be desired. Because the fundamental document itself, as Dr. Prashti said, in most instances has been very, very, very weak. And there are two components in the old EIA notification which have not been looked into at all. One is the environmental management plan. If you really do a quick, a rapid assessment of the number of assessment reports that we have on hand for the last 10 years, an environmental management plan beyond 2 pages is a rarity. It's a feel good, do good kind of a narrative that you often see this environmental management plan saying the project proponent hereby assures the government that no violation will take place. Now, what does that mean? When you don't put a number or a quantity or a quality to an attribute and make a commitment, this is a very weak thing. The second thing is the environmental compliance report, which needs to be filed. There's absolutely no record of any of these reports being filed on time or followed up for monitoring. Having said this, I would also say that one of the biggest weak points of the previous environmental impact assessment has been the manner in which the report is submitted. Who does the accredited agency, however good or bad it is, submit the report to? It submits the report to the project proponent with no clause whatsoever as to the document would be presented in its entirety to the government. That clause is not there. That particular component is not there. So very often, even the best in accredited agency, when it does a very decent report, like it happened for the Konkan Railway, and submitted it to the project proponent, the proponent only took a part of that report and submitted it to the government, whatever was convenient. The point I'm trying to make is the monitoring mechanism is absent. The third reason why EIAs have failed is why do we do a public consultation in the EIA process? Essentially to get a go ahead to inform the people of what is going to happen and what is going to be their benefit out of it. But does the same public get to be a part of it as the process goes on? Do they have a role? Is there something called a participatory review? Is there what is called a joint review? Is the design of the project iterative enough? Is the design of the project adaptive enough? These are all big lacuna that have not even been considered, and so thereby making the EIA process itself very weak. In summary, the legacy has been a very weak legacy. So anything even marginally better than that, I think we've achieved a lot. And your second question as to how do we actually ensure that our commitments to international conventions are met. One thing I'll have to say the rather proud kind of a stand is India is very good at signing all the international conventions. Any international convention that you see, India would be one of the first signatory to it. In fact, when it comes to my own sphere of ecology, 13 international conventions have been signed. In fact, one convention, the first line of it is enough for us to make sure that VIA is a strong process, the Convention on Biological Diversity. The first line of the convention is that we value the intrinsic value of species. All species have equal right to exist. But do we really translate that into EIA? We don't. So compliance with is always weak in India. When you actually look at the status reports that we are expected to submit every year or every 3 years to the convention secretariats, you will find that most of these don't meet the deadlines. We are delayed at least by a couple of years. And then there is always this very nice narrative of writing. I mean, I work very closely with the government and I'm fully empathetic to the plight of many of the people who work there, who are shortchanged by lack of data, access to technology, all that is given. I mean, I'm not discounting that at all. But every report of ours, irrespective of whether it's a status report or a compliance report or adherence to a commitment report, will begin with Kautilya. So the first few pages will talk about Kautilya and what a glorious tradition we have. In the next few pages, if you look at it, will be very dismal. The numbers will just not match up. And even a kind of a serious school teacher, if she takes a look at that report, you'll find lots of lacuna and gaps in it. So in summary, once again, compliance is something that we say we would adhere to, but in reality, it doesn't happen.
Yeah. So probably we will work out a way also that how we strengthen the compliances. I think it's not just the law and the notification. I think moving forward, I see a couple of hands raised. Maybe we can have a couple of questions from participants, and then we come to consolidate our recommendations. So I'll request Punita Kumar. I see her hand is raised. Unmuting you. Please ask your question. Yeah. Please be brief and specific.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, please.
Yeah, actually, I do completely agree with what Mr. Prutsi and Jayashree also mentioned. What I also feel is when I do my, I'm doing a module or I'm writing a paper. When I go for a search, I'm able to see only researches based, which is not based in India, and all what we have adopted or what we have borrowed is the information that we are getting from outside India. And we are not looking around. We are not talking to the communities exactly what Ms. Jayashree has mentioned, uh, which is a very big gap. We are just making our this assessments and all that based on the reports that we are getting. Now, what a simple thing what I mentioned, I stay in Chhattisgarh, and what a simple thing what I'm seeing is, I'll just close up with this example, is that with the climate change, whatever it is happening, the snakes are migrating or they are dying, and we are seeing a very different trend in the snake bites. The snake bites which usually used to happen in certain districts are not are now expanding, and we are also observing that certain snakes are which we never used to see in certain parts are coming. Snakes are migrating. Snakes are dying, breaking the ecological change. So many locusts and all this, which snakes are responsible to eat rats and insects. So we are not talking to our own people to find out all these things. We are depending upon so many researches which are based abroad. So I also feel that if assessment, we need to put more emphasis on these kinds of researches, which can help us to understand our own climatic conditions, how we are changing, how it is impacting our own areas, our own geography. Of course, it's a very global issue, but we also need to focus on our small geographical issues.
Definitely, Punita. If you have any specific question to ask also.
So how we should go about research and all those things?
Sure, research is an important element. Okay, thank you so much. We have another hand raised by Mr. Anthony Kolanur. I'm unmuting you, sir. Please ask your question or comment.
Hello. Yeah. My question was, I raised the hand because the mic of one of the speakers wasn't working. But now, given an opportunity, I'm asking a question. That is, can civil society groups spell out very clear indicators or parameters, and what are those indicators the project implementing agency has to comply with? And what are the specific criteria? And also some of the damages, displaced communities, human habitations, by what deadline, how we will relocate them, what type of housing we'll provide them. This we see in so many irrigation and dam projects where the displaced Adivasis and never given a suitable cultivatable land, and then we don't provide any housing which is of humanly possible and decent accommodation. So can we, civil society, instead of expecting the government to lay down criteria indicators, we have the knowledge and close proximity with this people and the environment. We put out the details and we put, these are the damages to be assessed, few possible damages to be assessed, and what impact it will create. Is the project implementers aware of it, and what possible compensations or remedial measures the implementing agency will do, by what time and within what framework, and what legal authority they will monitor it, and monitoring committees to be set up. That's my question. Can we, civil society itself take a lead in these discussions?
Thank you so much, sir. I think super very pertinent question. Maybe somebody among the panelists will like to answer. Maybe Dr. Jeshri or Mr. Prusti, Professor Santosh.
Yeah, I'll let me take a shot. I think what Mr. Antoni told, that civil society can set up some kind of guideline or provide some kind of insight is very much expected from the civil society, and therefore civil society groups must come together, hold consultation, and come out with very clear-cut indicators on these aspects. So that will help. It is when from the civil society, when we make this point time and again, we do not shy away from the necessity or the expectation that the civil society will provide input. Yes, when we say that government should, but we want a enabling environment that government should be willing to look at this kind of input while framing the law, the rules, the guidelines, and the remedial measures and all that. So that's absolutely doable and all that. Can I make the point, Vikrant, I was wanting to make in this session, or I can take it after a few questions?
Sir, maybe you can take up my next round if is a common question to all of you.
Okay.
That what are your recommendations moving forward? And that recommendations, not essentially looking at the notification, but it's a recommendation to stakeholders. So
Okay.
what do you recommend?
Yeah. You want that to be answered right now?
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah. Okay. My recommendations will be more than one. If I step outside the current the EIA notification, I like to suggest that civil society groups must come together and hold consultations intensely and identify the environmental impact issues and make clear-cut suggestions and recommendations with appropriate scientific supports, so that government looks at seriously. And government should open up. First, government should create an enabling environment. They want this input from civil society. That kind of situation. Number two is that the environment impact and disaster impact, this must be very categorically stated, whether it should be part of the disaster impact, disaster risk impact, risk analysis, risk audit, risk impact management. All these things should be hidden inside the environment impact assessment protocols, or it should be clearly made separate, distinct, and implementable. That they should, and then this work from the civil society will be much more focused, and it can provide some input to the government for policy making. Number three, that every disaster creates huge adverse environment impact. So I always talk about a protocol called rapid environment impact assessment. If you look at after every disaster, there is a demand of the central government that we got 5,000 crore, 3,000 crore, 10,000 crore damage recovery program and all that kind of thing. But nowhere I have seen that certain money is for managing the environment. These are all infrastructure, construction related stuff and all that. So my submission is that any disaster, because we are every now and then we are facing disasters. So after every disaster, there has to be a rapid environment impact assessment, and then in your recovery process, both civil society, corporates, and the government, they get engaged in the recovery process, and so they also address the issue of environment impact. So in the short term manner, they can manage things. On medium term manner, the things can be happened, and long term manner it can be happen. So that the ecological restoration, environment restoration is becoming an integral part of our recovery process. These are some of my suggestions.
Thank you so much, sir. Very useful going forward. So maybe I would also request Professor Santosh, what's the recommendation? I mean, we have had a good analysis of the whole thing. So what's your recommendation? Again, recommendation is for the stakeholders. I think we just don't limit ourselves on the notification now. Over to you, sir.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
I would just make a couple of small points as a takeaway. One, that what we are saying is a globally convention. We say that disaster is offshoots of development, and the bad development, you can say that without EIA, without SIA, without ecological assessment, this is happening. So we have to have a integrated approach. We cannot see EIA separately, then the disaster risk and also the development. We need to have an integrated
Mm.
framework. Number one. Number two, which I would suggest what Mr. Kusti was telling, that ecological recovery. I will beg to differ from him. I myself have coordinated three, four recovery projects, and I have seen that in one of the components in the projects has always been an restoration of environment, whether it's a or ecological restoration of a park or this is also considering that it should not further damage to the environment. So that is being taken care of in a very abundantly believe that this.
Sir,
But
if you can
where it is
speak
not,
in the mic,
okay.
better, better.
Let me.
Now it's
Uh,
better,
now,
sir.
now it's better. Okay. So what I am saying is the importance is one this the point which I was telling recovery is a part of this environment or ecological recovery part of the recovery project. But third important point is that what we are saying, we should simplify the process of EIA or DIA or community consultation. The more we put as the kind of a complexities, it will take larger time. So time is the major factor for execution of any of the projects. If you delayed the process, 5 साल 6 साल तक अगर things would continue of that, then probably will not be yielding result. So this process, where by building capacity or whatever, we need to reduce the time of all these assessments. And last but not the least, yes, I fully agree with what the community engagement that is very much important, but it should be a kind of a complementary to each other by government and the civil society group. This is my takeaway for my point of intervention. Thank you very much, Vicky.
Thank you so much, sir. And now maybe I may request Dr. Jayashree also. What are your recommendations, ma'am, to the stakeholders?
Yeah, thank you. The first would be that we operate the entire exercise within a framework where conservation and development are not pitted against each other. Second, we realize that EIA is not a standalone or an exclusive kind of an entity. It is integrated so much with so many other domains, from development to economics to democracy and a whole lot of things, but more importantly to disasters. If we have to achieve our objectives, we have to invest considerably effort, time, resources in building capacities of a large pool of experts. Only then, whatever we could plan to do in terms of hastening the time frame, rapid assessment, assessing corollary impacts, assessing reflected impacts, all these will be made possible. The basic skill set needs to be invested upon quite heavily. Then, of course, the issue of people participating in it, communities participating in it. How long is always a question. We need to go beyond just a symbolic or a ritualistic kind of a consultation that's done in the beginning to whole-time engagement. This also answers the question that Mr. Anthony asked. The consultation should be a kind of an ongoing process so that people get convinced about what we are doing and there are examples to emulate. And it's also in spirit of the democratic setup that we have in this country. And finally, we have to realize that all projects have to go through an iterative process. It cannot be that a permission given once stands for eternity. It needs to be reviewed because still we live in a world where things change. Things change not only because of what happens there, but also because what happens globally. I'm referring to the issue of climate change. For instance, a project sanctioned in Chennai coastline 20 years ago on a set of conditions needs to be reviewed in the current scenario of sea level rise, saltwater ingress. We cannot maintain a stand saying what was given 20 years ago is valid. So that iterative kind of a process needs to be set up. These would be some of the, at least the first set of recommendations that I would be making. I'm aware that I'm stepping outside what is conventionally discussed about when it comes to EIA, but I think the basics is where we need to invest a lot more to make this process very robust. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jayashree. Very useful. I see one hand was up. Okay. Yes, Mr. Anjay Kumar, you can ask your question or comment. I'm unmuting you, please.
Yeah. Good evening. I'm Anjay Kumar. Uh, it can be taken as a recommendation or otherwise it can be a question how it can be achieved that. First, that to improve the quality of environmental impact assessment report, it is good that accredited consultant prepares that report and once it is report is prepared by the consultant, if an additional step can be inserted for the review of these reports by another accredited consultant so that a good review of the report can be done and a quality report can be submitted and quality report can be included in the execution of the project. My second suggestion is that there is a expert appraisal committee and see the processes are the selection of expert in the appraisal committee should be more transparent and it should be some competitive so that better and the experts who are really interested in the environmental studies or environmental field, they should come forward and involved in the review of these kind of projects. And these experts more power and more freedom should be given to these experts for the review as well as the assessment of the outcome and the findings of the report. That is all from my. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Anjay Kumar. If somebody among others in the participants have any query, question, recommendation to make, please, I think it's time for you now.
Vikrant, I think Mr. Prishti has requested to quickly speak on rapid environment impact assessment. So, would you still like to make a brief comment on that?
I think I made my point on rapid environmental impact assessment when I was responding to some of the questions. My point is that I also made in the chat box that immediately after any disaster, small or big, there has to be rapid assessment, like we developed a tool for joint needs assessment and all that, something like that. Their environmental impact assessment can be done. And immediately remedial measures can be also incorporated into the short-term, medium-term, and long-term recovery processes and programs that by all types of stakeholders, community, civil society, corporate, and the government. And what Professor Santosh mentioned about the ecological restoration and all that, these are very well done in very large projects, especially the World Bank funded projects and kind of things. There is very comprehensive analysis and there is enough budget provision and those things are being done. But my point was more towards the recurring disasters, like flood has taken place in Bangalore, in Assam, in Bihar. There are definitely some environmental impact. How we identify those and make some corrective measures. So these are my some observations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Prustiji. And I think, yes,
And just one point which I would like to add,
yes, sir,
just for
please,
information,
sir.
that NIDM, which has developed a post-disaster need assessment tool on the basis of international practices, that has a component of environmental
Yes,
impact
yes,
assessment too
yes,
on
yes,
the
it has.
disaster. What Mr. Prusti is saying.
Yes.
Yeah, and second, there is a rapid assessment tool has also been developed by the SARC Disaster Management Center, which also has a component for assessment of environment damage and the cost, quantify terms. So that just wanted to inform the House. Thank you.
And these tools are available. There are like some other tools are also. So this should be
Yeah,
used
it's
used
available.
frequently.
Available.
Yeah, yeah. It is to be used frequently, and
Yes, yes.
it should be put into practice. Thank you, Professor Santosh, bringing it out.
Yes, sir. I think so. We do see some of these provisions within the disaster assessment, disaster whether need assessment or the damage assessments, which we follow. But do we really see the kind of an environmental response the way the other response on recovery happens? So, do we see the environment response as a practice happening?
Vikrant, you can see the report of EDN of two states. One, the recently which Orissa has done of the funny, and the second was also done by Kerala in Kerala government along with the UNDP and IDM work together on that, where is a very nicely this impact has been calculated and brought in.
Yes, I agree with you. We have seen the damage, environmental, the impact of disaster on the environment. It's what has been damaged. I've seen some of these reports, but my query was coming on the next ahead of it. Beyond after damage, do we also gear up for the environmental response? Uh, is
Mm.
there, is something which that can be done to recover from the environment losses of other disasters? Do we have a practice of that?
May I
Yeah, it
intervene in
is
that?
coming as a recovery plan. It is coming, but what I'm saying is that just limited to the project. What is happening is a larger beyond the project. It never happens. That is the concern. Like if you finish this project and is a environmental restoration is a long-term process and issue. So that has to be taken up in the larger development planning also. So that is missing.
Yes, so that's what I mean. In my experience, the environment restoration, we get community rehab projects. We work on the economic recovery projects, but do we really work on environment restoration
Mm,
projects?
mm.
That's what I'm
May
coming.
I intervene?
Dr. Jeshri, you want to say something on that?
Yeah, the straight or the most apparent answer to your question is it's a big no. The Kerala recurrent floods in Kerala stand testimony to it. The fact that we don't invest our energies, time, and effort into the ecological recovery or the eco recovery is amply testified by the fact that the same districts are experiencing more and more intense floods and landslides. And they're happening on a recurrent basis and with more intensity. So if you all recall the report that was put together by Professor Madhav Gadgil and his team on the Western Ghats ecosystem, the entire Western Ghats chain of hills, he had very clearly identified certain zones as being the most vulnerable and critical, both in terms of ecological merit as well as prone vulnerability to disasters. The report was rejected even without a basic scrutiny, saying that there are vested interests and people's lives are going to be displaced and they're going to be hit hard. So after ignoring the report, what is happening is even worse. So the fundamental appreciation and recognition of science as being the backbone for this is missing. If we don't recognize science as being a very critical input into such reports or such actions, this is bound to happen. We don't even have to go to a point where we are discussing recovery and the need to invest in rehabilitation, need to invest invest in rapid ecological assessments or environmental assessments. The fundamentals itself are missing. That is the biggest lacuna in this country. And the whole thing is done with a human centric approach. Unfortunately, we don't live in a world where only we live. We are the top predators, and we have a responsibility to make sure that the other organisms also have an equal opportunity to survive. We're all linked in a food web. We cannot exclude ourselves. The point that the young lady made about snakes is very telling. I can straight away see what's happening there. That's because of some experience of working in that area. We don't live in isolation. We are not in an island where nobody is listening to us. We are all connected.
Dr. Jayashree, you got mute by I think mistake. Would you like to unmute and complete yours? Okay. So, Pushti, you were saying something that time.
No, I said I agree fully with Dr. Jayashree, and she was quite emphatic on making the point with respect to Kerala and all that. Uh, I think I have no point in reiterating the same thing again and again.
Yeah, I think that coming from my own experience and curious, like we have seen some of disaster has been uh, clearly the environmental disasters. We have seen so many forest fires, and uh, we see this. Many of the cyclones have considerable impact on the coral reefs as well as the in the Sundarbans. What we see the mangroves and all. One is the nature rejuvenates on its own, but do we see the kind of an environmental recovery responses after that? I think it's otherwise the in the damage and need assessments, it's just to quantify the damage and losses, or do we need to go beyond and look at the environmental response and recovery initiatives also? So that's was the thought coming in, and I felt like flagging it out also here in this discussion. Moving forward, I think it's time. Maybe I'll request Major General Bindal if you would like to say a few words towards the end before we summarize and close. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vikrant. I have three issues. One is I agree with Dr. Pushti that some funds need to be earmarked for environmental program after a disaster. So maybe that can be tweaked, that part of the funds allotted for any rehabilitation or reconstruction should be used for environmental restoration of that local area. Large scale projects for restoration of ecosystems is not possible within that fund, but local level actions are possible. And if once they're made part of the compulsory part of the restoration or rehabilitation or the reconstruction part, we can save our environment to some extent. Second issue is about the environmental vulnerability map. Like we have as a hazard vulnerability map. Now, a normal person doesn't know what is the vulnerability around and how is the environmental getting impacted. So I think regionally and small levels, we can go in for making vulnerability maps. And in that, the civil society organizations who have a far reach in the local areas can help the government. The issue which was brought about that civil societies can get together and come out with some policy guidelines. I think that is a good idea, but by coming out with the policy guidelines on their own is not going to give any dividends because the government doesn't take it seriously. It's always better to to be on board with the ministry of liquor department and have the document come out as that ministry's department. The civil society has got a big strength and they have got the capability of coming out with uh, uh, innovative solutions and everything, but they need to get on board with the ministry to have their voices heard. On their own, I don't think the situation will change so easily, that independent document made by the ministry, by the civil society organization will be given legal value or will come into policy guidelines so easily. So with these three issues, I think I will close my comments because I feel civil society has got a lot to offer, and there is a need for the government agencies to get them on board and use their capacities and strengths and not consider them as a rival organization, but to consider them as the friends of the society, which they are, and work for the environmental protection for the future. Over to you, Vikram.
Thank you so much, sir, for your this including encouraging words, and I completely agree with you. I think as different stakeholder groups, each one of us have a role, individually or separately, but we play a more meaningful and a more purposeful role by as a collaborating together. And it's important that we see these kind of exercises more and build a more trust among these stakeholders. The government see the civil societies as a partners in the process, and the debate as a way of finding solutions, and we all see and work constructively onto that. I think that's the spirit behind which this Fair India as a coalition also work, and we plan the discussion and webinars ahead. So coming towards the end, I think it's been a very interesting discussion today. What you see that the notification being out and the government ministry very openly coming up for the consultation and asking for the feedback on that. I think that a substantive amount of feedback have already been received. Perhaps the process and the channels still active, where we are working partnerships. We will be able to put more ideas across. But I think the discussion today and the way and the ahead would not just be about making our submissions on the notification. I think it is about we see as a group of stakeholders our coming together and identifying our roles within this in this debate and discussion, and also the actions more around that. And in those roles which we identifying, how we are taking it ahead as a collectively or even as a stakeholder group wise. That's why some of the recommendations which I asked to the speakers and also to the participants is, if you have any recommendations, not just for the notification but also to different stakeholder groups, also as a collective what we should be doing, please submit those recommendations. My team, Paitosh and his other colleagues will continue to take note of these recommendations, and to with the help of these we will definitely try to put up some kind of collective actions and work collaboratively, as General Bandal has suggested, maybe on a policy level and also on the operational level with the government and other non-government actors and stakeholders. So thanks a lot. It's my moment to express my thanks to our eminent panelists. My special thanks to Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal for his keynote address and also sharing the guidance around there. I thanks Dr. Jeshri, Mr. Prusti, Professor Santosh Kumar, Mr. Sanjay Vashisht, who could not join us because again he is traveling, but his presence always been there on these issues. My thanks to all of you for participating and for all the good work you have been doing on various issues, and that's too in the difficult context of a COVID and the new realities we are living with. Thanks to the team, thanks to our collaborators, UNICEF, WHO, World Food Program, HCL Foundation, NIDM. Thanks everybody, and I hand it back to my colleague Navila for her final recommendations or final any logistic issues she has to summarize this thing. Over to you, Navila.
Thank you, Vikrant. I would just quickly announce few evaluation process. As during the phase one, also we have continuously provided certificate of participation, also a part of course evaluation, which we have been doing. We'll continue doing that for all our participants, even in the phase two. So to get your certificate of participation, please visit our website, which is www.spearindiacovid19academy.org. Please visit it after 24 hours. Scroll down and find the course details there, and you will get your certificate of participation by entering your name and your email ID. Also, in the past, few of our participants have faced difficulty in downloading the certificate. So if you face any technical queries, you can definitely write a mail to us at covid19academy@spearindia.org.in, and we will try to resolve all your queries. So with this, I would really like to thank all the panelists and for attending the session. Thank you, Vikrant, for moderating it so well, keeping us all time intact. And thank you all the participants for making it a very, very successful session. Have a great evening, everyone, and see you in our next session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.